the word tribe is a political statement. It was actually deliberately introduced to give a connotation of primitive people, backward people, uncivilized people, disorganized people, people unable to govern themselves, to more or less justify colonization. When it becomes suggested to you long enough, you begin to interpret yourself the same way the power that wanted to colonize you wanted you to think, so that you could accept his process of colonization. But today, if you look at it different and you say, okay, these so-called tribes were nations, smaller maybe, less sophisticated maybe, but they were nations. I call those nations, the so-called tribes, I call them micronations. Once we accept to lose our micronation status, once we lose that identity, I become a slave. And a slave has no confidence, he has no self-respect, because a slave is a person who has been denied the opportunity to be himself. A slave is a person who has been robbed. We need to accept ourselves as a micronation. We need to accept our identity of that micronation. We need to give ourselves self-confidence through that micronation, because that is what gives me identity. See, if I say I'm a Kikuyu, if I mention my name, anybody who knows Kikuyus will know that's a Kikuyu girl, all right. And if I say I'm a Kikuyu, they all know, if they come from Kenya, which part of the country I come from. I see myself as coming from the Kikuyu micronation, and I'm working desperately to try to see if all the micronations in Kenya could work together. But I also want to encourage them to remain who they are and to bring their baggage to the table and all together try to create a new nation. But that new nation is going to have to be a mixture of what we all are. All trees in the forest are not the same. You have the diversity. And I think that if we do really believe in diversity of life in the forest, life in the seas, why should we be afraid of diversity among us humans? That is something we should be celebrating. In 1885, Britain and other powers decided that they would divide Africa and divide these nations into new nations. They lumped them together and they formed new nations, completely with a piece of paper and a pencil on a map.
What Britain did was something more important than the occupation of geography and the defeat of politics. What it did was destroyed the confidence of the Asian people and the African people. Who turned Africa into a dark continent? It is a question which I never have found an answer to. There is no more beautiful a continent than Africa, as anyone who comes here finds. But you had to convert it as an image of a barbaric continent which had to be relieved from its own culture, from its own history, from its own. Who created the term witch doctor? As if the medicine, which was a part of the cultural history or of the history of Africa, was part of witchcraft. We have been taught the language of subservience. We have been taught to hate ourselves. In order to create the other, in order to create a rationale for power and for empire building, you had to convert the Asian people and the African people into a slothful, backward burden upon the world, the white man's burden of Rudyard Kipling. Gandhi used to say it all the time, that long before you can defeat that white man who has come to defeat us, you have to find yourself again. You have to find your confidence and your courage again.
There is an ambivalence that African Christians have towards the missionary movement. There is no question at all that very many good things came with the missionaries. Many of us are educated today, only because of the commitment of women, men and women from overseas who built schools and colleges and universities. Many of us are alive today because of the same commitment that they had to provide health services. They were also part of the imperial movement, the colonizing movement, and they came with the arrogance of the powerful. And so there is the story, it's not original to me, it's a story that has been told before, where they say, when the missionaries came, we had the land and they had the Bible. And they said, let us pray, and we dutifully shut our eyes, and when we said amen and opened our eyes, they had the land and we had the Bible.
Now looking back, I know and I appreciate now that when you grow up in a colonial system, or in whichever system you grow up, people who design that system design in such a way that they will produce a certain kind of people, because they give them a certain kind of information, they expose them to a certain kind of information, and they keep certain kind of information away from them. So you grow up with a certain attitude. You are shaped. Your mind, your attitude, your values are shaped. Your world is shaped. And you are deliberately discouraged to appreciate anything about you, because you are not supposed to know or to imagine there was anything good in your pre-British experience. So your people in the pre-British era were primitive, they were backward, they didn't know anything, they did not even know anything about God. Now you know about God, you know about Jesus, you're saying the rosary. Remember, I was saying the rosary. All these things are packaged in such a way that you look at the British and you admire them greatly.